Hey, what is going on guys? My name is InTheGamerTag and I'm back for your daily Fortnite video. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys the best settings for every controller player. Regardless if you're playing on console or PC, these settings should allow you guys to play at your highest potential. Obviously, a couple weeks back, one of the big news in Fortnite was that Epic Games actually vaulted legacy settings. So a lot of players that used legacy were actually left in the dark as of where to go from there. I'm making this video to share with you guys the settings that I find to be the absolute best since that update, and that again should allow you guys to play at your best and highest potential. I'm going to be going over literally every settings from sensitivity to keybinds, as well as some general miscellaneous settings that I feel like should be really beneficial to you guys. We're going to start in the controller options tab, and we're going to work away from the top to the bottom on settings that I feel like should be addressed. Starting with, of course, build immediately, otherwise known as Builder Pro. You guys should have this turned on. Edit hold time, this is actually not going to matter, believe it or not, and this will be explained further in detail when we hop into keybinds. Now down to our sensitivity. For the build mode sensitivity multiplier, I strongly recommend you guys use around a 1.6, as well as the same setting for the edit mode sensitivity multiplier. And I'm sure a lot of you guys actually have yours higher than this, and I'll explain how we're able to still build and edit relatively fast, despite the fact that these are actually quite low. Next is obviously going to be the advanced look sensitivity settings. Starting with the look horizontal and look vertical speed, I currently have both mine set at a 60% and actually don't have any horizontal or vertical boost at all in all of these settings, so do not worry about that. I feel like that is just a bit too complicated to actually start to jump into immediately, so you guys don't have to worry about that. Again, that is way too complicated and advanced, and honestly it's kind of difficult to understand if you're not a competitive player. Below this is going to be our ADS sensitivity, otherwise known as the aim down sight sensitivity. Obviously, this is going to affect every time when we aim down our sights in Fortnite. So our ADS look horizontal and vertical speed should both be set at a 20%. And as I mentioned, we're not going to be using any vertical boost or horizontal boost as well for these. Continuously making our way down, we have the advanced sensitivity settings, starting with the look dampening time. I recommend you guys lower yours to a 0.05 seconds. Now this setting isn't actually as important unless you're using linear, however I've just always kept it at a 0.05. I feel like honestly you could actually lower it all the way to a 0.00, but again for me a 0.05 has always done myself justice. The look input curve, we are using an exponential. I know a lot of people are very against the linear look input curve, and I completely understand why. So considering the fact that the exponential look input curve is definitely more favored, I decided to make these settings revolved around this one. So you guys do not have to worry about trying to get used to linear and completely switching up your entire game style. The aim assist strength, I mean this goes without saying, this should always be at 100%. So if yours is lower than this for whatever reason, do yourself the favor by raising it all the way. And then down here, the controller dead zone. This is honestly one of the most important settings of today's video, believe it or not. So our move stick dead zone, this one doesn't really matter at all. You can have this defaulted at a 20%, but the look stick dead zone is actually the one that is extremely important, and this is going to be our right analog stick. Now you want to lower this to around a 10%. The reason we're lowering it is because it actually allows us to move quicker and snappier. When we build, edit, and aim, everything is controlled by our look stick. Again, this is going to be the right analog stick. So by lowering it to a 10%, again, it allows us to have that faster movement, and honestly allows us to have essentially more control over everything that we're doing in a quicker manner. This is also how we're able to build and edit fast, despite the fact that we have semi-low sensitivity multipliers on both of those settings. So again, a 10% should be just fine with you guys. If you like to lower it and you feel it's more comfortable, then by all means do that as well. So again, the look stick dead zone is single-handedly probably the most important and critical setting of today's video. And we're now going to move on to the keybinds. Again, this is also a very important setting. A lot of people are always asking me what my keybinds are. I guess because of my editing, possibly. I'm not that great at editing, but obviously this is all controlled by my keybind. So I do play on a custom Builder Pro, which I strongly recommend everybody use. If you're not on a Builder Pro, then you should probably make the switch over. You'll probably see an immediate improvement. Now basically mine are actually pretty simple. There's only a couple changes I have made, but they are quite drastic nonetheless. So my Y button, which of course is triangle for PS4, is binded to edit. My B or circle is binded to switch mode, and my left analog stick clicked in is binded to toggle pickaxe. Now the reason I have these set this way is because essentially I wanted to have an instant edit button. This way I didn't have to hold a button down when I go to edit, and I figured that Y or triangle was my best bet, considering I actually rest my finger here nearly at all times. Now I constantly get asked if this is possible to use if you don't play claw. Yes, I do play claw, but you can also use this if you don't. I've tried it and it works just as great. So So again, the combat controls is Y triangle for edit, left analog stick for toggle pickaxe, and then B or circle for switch mode. This allows you guys to pretty much toggle between your pickaxe and inventory immediately, and also being able to edit immediately, not having any complications, whereas if you were to use the default Builder Pro settings, it would be honestly quite a mess. Then moving on to the edit controls, I actually have one thing changed here, and this is that my confirm button is set to left trigger rather than B or Y. So when I go to edit, I press Y or triangle, I select my tiles with my right trigger and then confirm it with my left trigger. Essentially the reason I've done this is because when you use the same button for edit and confirm, it creates a lot of complications and honestly even slows down your edits. So if you use separate buttons, especially on separate hands, Y and obviously left trigger are pressed by different fingers on different hands, it allows us to first of all edit and select our tiles and then immediately confirm it within a matter of like a split second. This is how a lot of the pro players are actually able to edit immediately rather than having any sort of time gap between edits and confirms. And if you guys want some validation for these settings, believe it or not, Faceway uses these exact same settings. So that alone should be a vouch that these settings work perfectly. And we're now going to hop into some of the miscellaneous settings that I honestly feel like are very important as well, so definitely don't skip these because these can also make a drastic change to your gameplay. Believe it or not, the first thing we're going to be talking about is brightness, and a lot of people always wonder why I go over this. Well, essentially the reason being is because a lot of competitive players actually turn their brightness up from 100% to 120%. The reason being is because it allows you to spot players a lot easier. And again, it sounds pretty weird and obviously kind of like a reach, but once you do turn it up to a 120%, you'll immediately start to notice a difference. You'll be able to spot llamas easier, loot easier, as well as players in dark areas easier as well. Moving down is now going to be the motion blur. Now this is a semi-new setting to console Fortnite. Basically, I strongly recommend everyone turn motion blur on. Honestly, this just makes all of the animations and movement a lot more smoother when this is on rather than off. Show FPS obviously doesn't matter too much. Now we're going to go over the game settings in the game tab, and sprint by default is the first one we're going to go over, and this should be on at all times. For a couple of reasons. One is obviously there should never be a time in Fortnite when you're not sprinting, and you could argue that there's times where you need to crouch and move slowly. Well, when you crouch, obviously you won't be sprinting using sprint by default, so turn sprint by default on. And also the main reason we do this is because our keybinds actually, since we use toggle pickaxe for the left analog stick, we have no sprint button. So turn on sprint by default. Basically every good player on Fortnite actually has this setting on, believe it or not. Auto open doors is a setting that I find to be pretty important, especially if you're someone that is making a lot of edit plays. Reason being is because a lot of times when you're in a build off and you're kind of panicking while editing, you'll sometimes edit a door rather than a 3-corner edit. So rather than having to go out of your edit menu, open the door to continue moving, with auto open doors on, your player will immediately open the door and you can continue with building and editing. Obviously it sounds kind of complicated, but if you're again a player that does a lot of edits and builds, then definitely turn this setting on. I guarantee you guys it will help you a lot. If you're a player that's not constantly editing and building, then this setting obviously comes down to personal preference. Now moving down is going to be the building settings. Obviously reset building choice should be on. Turbo building also should be on for a lot quicker and faster builds. Confirm edit on release is a very controversial setting. I think if you're a player that is extremely new to Fortnite, like if you just started playing Fortnite less than a month ago, then obviously turn this setting on. It will help you get used to the typical and general editing mechanics. You'll kind of understand how it works, and then once you get used to it, I recommend you turn it off. However, if you're a player that's been playing Fortnite for quite some time and you already have the general concept down of editing, then leave this setting alone. Please turn it off. And the reason being is because you're actually unable to even edit that fast and confirm that fast by using this setting, despite what a lot of people think. So when you actually go to make the switch from confirm edit on release to an actual confirm edit button, it's going to be completely difficult and hard to get used to, and it's honestly not worth the trouble. So just keep confirm edit on release and do not bother with it. Moving our way down into the extra game options is actually going to be tap to search or interact. Now this is one that I've been using for quite some time, and it doesn't affect too much. It just allows us to have a bit more ease access when playing. Essentially when you go to open anything in the game, like a chest, an ammo box, a supply drop, literally even reviving a teammate as well. With tap to search or interact on, you no longer have to hold X or square. You can simply just tap it, and then basically for the duration of the timer, you no longer have to hold it. Again, this one isn't too critical. However, it does make it a lot easier, and I strongly recommend you guys turn this on. And then finally is actually going to be in our replays. You guys are probably really wondering why we're even talking about this. Well, believe it or not, console has this weird thing where if you have your record replays on, it makes the game a lot less smooth. Your FPS is going to be lower, and you're going to have a lot of micro stutters. So I strongly recommend you turn your record replays off, your record large team replays off, as well as your record creative mode replays off. Reason being is because, again, with all of these off, we want to have extremely smooth FPS. The game will be running very consistently and everything will be a lot smoother. If you have these on and you turn them off, you'll immediately notice a difference, and I guarantee you guys will be grateful of turning these settings off. So that's essentially going to be all of today's video. Obviously, if you guys have used all of these settings and maybe some things feel a little different and unnatural to you guys, you can certainly tweak them to your own personal preference. Obviously, this is like a basis or a platform of settings to kind of build off and branch off to have your own personal ones. These are what I've been using for quite some time. They've done me justice for the longest time, and I absolutely love these settings. Now, if you guys enjoyed today's video or found it helpful, a like would be beyond appreciated. And of course, on the contrary, if you genuinely dislike today's video, then by all means feel free to leave a dislike as well. And if you're new around here and would like to see more daily Fortnite content like this in the future, feel free to subscribe as well as turning on those post notifications. Nonetheless, my name is Gamertag. Thank you all for watching today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow. Adios.